Hello, all. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. Costume one, the clown. I was 5. It was a rainy Friday in New York, Long Island, New York, to be precise. And it was Halloween. Now, my mom had decided because my biological father was out of town touring with his musician group that she was going to make this a special Halloween. So she decided that we were going to get to watch the Addams family and the Munsters. We were going to get to eat cupcakes and ice cream, and we got a new Scooby Doo movie. The perfect Halloween. And we played all morning and we watched all the things, we ate all the things. And then it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we were homeschooled, so we didn't do schoolwork on Fridays. So my mom didn't have schoolwork that she could give us to do. So she told us that we were going to be allowed to go outside. Now that's really exciting because I really loved going outside. And it was rainy, so that made it extra special. And then, as we were getting ready to go down the stairs to go into the kitchen and leave, she told us we could go outside without our shoes on. So, before my mom could tell us another thing, we ran down the stairs and around the corner, through the living room, out through the kitchen, and down onto the pavement. Now, this pavement, a little patio, it had concrete with little pebbles in it. And that has a really particular feeling under your feet. And as I stepped down, I felt the pressure, and I felt like that pressure should have hurt. I was dressed up in my clown costume. My brother and sister and I were identical clowns. So I had my little curly red wig, and I had my big red spots on my cheeks, and my white blouse, and my red overalls that came mid-thigh. But the thing that I remember the most was the tights. They were red and white striped all the way up, and they snugged my feet nice and tight all the way up into my thighs. And as I stepped down onto that concrete and I felt the pebbles, I didn't feel any pain. And I took off running down the 2 little steps, and we started to jump in all the rain puddles, and we moved and we danced exactly as you would imagine clowns would dance. And it felt like we played for hours. And then it was time to go inside. I was the last one in because I was the oldest and therefore the most responsible to close the door. And as I'm going up to the door and I reach my hand for the handle, I took a second and I felt the pebbles under my feet. And then I picked my foot up. And my favorite thing was that I couldn't see the white of the stripes anymore because it was all brown with mud. It was the perfect Halloween. Costume 2, Dorothy. I'm 10, and as a 10-year-old, things are very serious. Costumes are very serious. And I decided this year that I was going to be Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. I was going to be accurate. So when we got the costume, it had the white tights, the perfectly pristine white tights, the little dress with the apron, the white apron, and it even came with 2 hair ties. So you could split your hair and you could have the perfect, even braids. I had short hair, but it didn't matter because I could get like 1 set of little braids each, and that's all close enough. But what it didn't have was the shoes. So my mom drove us to 4 Walmarts before we found them. The perfect shoes. They were red and sparkly and hung on the hooks in Walmart. You know the hooks. And they had 1 pair in my size. And they had the little Velcro straps so they'd stay on my feet while I was adventuring. It was perfect. And I got dressed on Halloween. I made sure everything was perfect, not a wrinkle in sight, because Dorothy would not have wrinkles, and I wanted to be mistaken for Dorothy. And I got all dressed up and I slipped on my shoes and I was waiting for Halloween to start when my mom told us that we were going to get to go trick-or-treating this year. We weren't allowed to go trick-or-treating. My mom had 2 rules about Halloween. 1, no scary costumes. And 2, no trick-or-treating. But this year, we were going trick-or-treating. The thing you saw in movies and you read in books. And I was so excited. We got into the car and I strapped in and put my seatbelt on and we drove to my cousin's house. Their house was really big and beautiful. And I felt so comfortable as Dorothy as we walked up and down this neighborhood. The neighborhood was like a park with a few houses in it. So we had a lot of walking to do. And we had this big bag that we each had to fill with candy. And we walked and we walked. We started midday and we were out until almost 11 o'clock. We filled up our bags nice and full. And I skipped from house to house, even though I remembered that Dorothy probably would have skipped in a slightly different way. So I tried to match her skipping. When we went home that night with my bag full of candy, I took off my costume and I felt my feet. The shoes were maybe a little tight, but they were perfect. And my feet were a little bruised and a little blistered, but Dorothy wouldn't have cared. And I took out my bag of candy and I separated all the pieces into their appropriate piles and I counted every piece because 2 younger siblings will steal your candy if you're not careful. Doesn't matter how much of it they have themselves. And I separated them all out in these beautiful piles. And I just looked and looked until I was tired enough to go to sleep. By the time I laid down in bed and I tucked myself in, it was midnight. And I was laying down, ready to fall asleep, when I heard my parents start to argue. My mom made a big point of trying not to argue on holidays, but I heard them arguing about when we were moving and money and my grandparents not being super healthy and hard things. And as I listened, it made me sad. And as I drifted off to sleep, the last thought that I had was, I guess the holidays don't last past midnight, not even Halloween. Costume 3, the bee. I was 13. I didn't want to be a bee. Who wants to be a bee at 13? We had moved from New York to North Carolina, and I had started public school, so I was grown up. I was a little small for my age. I looked 7, but I was actually 30 at heart. I was ready to be moved out, and I was ready to have my college degrees, all 5 million of them, including my doctorate, and I was ready for my life to begin. But my mom decided this year she was going to take us trick-or-treating. She didn't take us last time. My cousins did. So that was, I guess, a big deal. But I didn't want to get dressed up. Nobody else was dressing up. No one else in my grade, except for the popular kids, but they had cool costumes. When we went to Walmart and picked out this costume, it was labeled as a sexy bee. The dress came to my knees and had a scratchy turtleneck, and it was like a trash bag, and it itched. I was too old to dress up. And every time I shifted it at my knees, it just got baggier and uglier. And as we rode to go trick-or-treating, I sat there and I had my little pail in my lap. I told my mom I didn't want to go trick-or-treating. Well, we went and we had an all right time. We went up and down these streets. The houses were really close together, so we could go to lots and lots of houses this time. And I filled up my Halloween bucket just enough, just an adult amount of candy, I imagined. And I wore my Mary Janes and my black tights, and I walked just long enough. And as we went back home, I looked down at my bucket of candy. I was all strapped into my seat. And I began to think about my parents' divorce. What would that mean? Mom said there was going to be no more arguing, that we'd have peace. That sounds nice. When we got home, it was after dark, and I had school the next morning. So I took off my costume and I sat down on my bed and I put the bucket of candy next to the bed. An adult would count their candy in the morning. And as I laid there in bed and I started to snuggle in, the thought that popped into my head as I drifted off to sleep was, wow, at least my feet don't hurt this time. Costume 4. The costume of me. The thing I hate about New Year's resolutions is that there's so much expectation. You know, so many things that we're expected to do. We're expected to keep this thing. And something as a child that I really wanted to keep to was to being what everyone else wanted me to be. I still do that sometimes. Sometimes when I get up in the morning, I go to my closet to get dressed and I put on the clothes that people want me to put on. Sometimes I grab that horrible pink blouse, hot pink blouse that my mother insists looks gorgeous on me, with the little white pearl buttons and the frills, and it's too big and it's too small in other ways. A blouse that tells me that I need to dream big, but not too big, not too far away from home. A blouse that reminds me that she wants me to be smart and wise and kind, but not too much. Not to work too hard, but hard enough that I need to succeed enough to prove to other people that I'm good enough. Sometimes I go to my dresser and I pull up the watch that my ex gave me, beautiful little black timepiece. And as I put it on, I note the time. It's always 2 minutes and 36 seconds slow. Tick, 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 tick. And as it ticks, I watch the time and I feel the weight of the expectation that I should have waited just a little longer to leave a toxic relationship. I needed to wait till he was ready. And sometimes I see the high heels that I put on that feel like steel cages that I wear because other people want me to look feminine in a feminine manner. But some days, some very, very special days, I get up and I get dressed like me, in my favorite heeled booties and my blazer and my Henley. And as I grab my keys and I walk out the door, I think it's nice to dress up as me for a change. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.